So you mentioned that cannabis clinical trials face unique recruitment challenges. How do these differ from recruitment issues with more traditional medical studies? Rachel, why don't you take this one?
Sure. So, in general, when you're recruiting patients to be participants in a clinical trial, you're looking for people who have the particular condition or disorder that you're studying the drug in, but also to some extent, who may be a bit of a clean slate or blank slate as far as prior exposure or experience with that particular therapy. If participants have previous experience for some reason with the drug that you're testing, that may bias their experience or their outcomes during the trial. If they have a history of a bad experience or ineffective treatment with something, they come in with a particular set of preconceived notions that may impact how they respond during the trial. And, for most novel drugs that come to market,
Mhm.
if they're truly new, participants haven't seen them before, and so you have that opportunity to really start from scratch. But in the case of cannabis studies, so many people out there have some prior experience with cannabis, good or bad, very rare or once or incredibly frequent. And either way, it makes it hard to enroll participants who truly represent sort of that blank slate, who can give you what you hope is an unbiased experience during the trial.
Excellent. And now, would that still apply? So, I obviously I can imagine a scenario where someone would have a previous experience with cannabis, maybe smoking it or using flower. Now, if the trial were using a tincture or a tablet or something, some other delivery mechanism for the cannabinoids, is that less of a concern, have you found?
In general, no, it doesn't matter the route of delivery. For us in many of these trials, we're really looking for people who are only using the cannabinoid that we are administering in the course of the trial. And so even if they're using a tincture and we're administering, inhaled flower, vaporized, or, conversely, if they smoke or vape routinely and we're going to give them an oral solution, they're still getting exposure to those cannabinoids on a regular basis that makes it difficult for us to tease out their response to the ones that we're administering, which
Oh,
is the
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that makes sense.
Yeah,
And
and you can
so,
imagine someone coming in if they're using regularly and then come in and versus someone who is, fairly naive and not using, you're going to see tolerance and different reactions. And so it's important that we have kind of a level playing field for participants when they come in.
yeah,
in
and then conversely, it looks like that there's also an issue for people who are maybe cannabis naive and maybe have some preconceived notions about cannabis that might be deterring them as well. If you could speak to that.
Yeah, there's, still today a stigma associated with using cannabis. And so some people who maybe haven't tried it before and have thought about it, but they're concerned about, oh no, am I going to get high? Am I going to have to explain to my family members and friends that I'm using something that's still federally illegal? So there's a lot of different aspects that play into that for someone who has not had prior experience and concerns about, just like any side effects in general, which is understandable.
And we've also had a number of participants who have not been able to, fully enroll in the study or begin treatment with study drug for occupational reasons. They may be in a job where they are subject to regular drug testing and are very concerned about the implications of potentially testing positive for a cannabinoid in that setting.
Absolutely. And so I imagine most of that concern would be in a trial that's using THC, correct?
Yes, but some people, as Emily highlighted, the stigma and I think some misinformation share those concerns even about CBD. I think there's still a lot of things that people aren't aware of in terms of just how many cannabinoids there are out there and which of those, do have those properties that might impair their function on the job versus which of those are probably more benign from that standpoint, and whether or not they're likely to test positive, if there's cross reactivity on a drug test.
Yeah, and so that's a good point that if it's CBD only and you're looking at a clinical trial where we can, guarantee for you that you're really only receiving CBD, then it's really unlikely you're going to test positive because at least to our knowledge right now, drug tests that you're going to get at your workplace are looking for THC. So that shouldn't be an issue. Where we run into more of a murky area are the observational studies that we do, where participants are choosing their own products.
Right.
And, so they might purchase something online that says it's only CBD, but you might be aware that there's, quite a few studies out there showing that when they actually go out and purchase these retail products and have them tested, that they actually find THC in a number of those products. So that's where we can't be as reassuring to participants that if they're taking that they really aren't going to test positive in that situation.
And I think that's such an important distinction to make between an observational trial and a clinical study. When we use cannabis products in a clinical trial, these products have undergone rigorous testing. We do have to submit data to the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, to get permission to even use these products in a trial. So there has to be consistency in the cannabinoid content and, what's on the label in terms of the cannabinoids within that product has to be accurate. There's no room for that kind of error that we do see commonly in the commercial marketplace.
Yeah. No, and that must be a whole nother set of challenges in doing clinical trials with cannabis is making sure that you're compliant with the FDA and all the different regulations, right?
Absolutely. And that's true of any drug that's being studied. Anytime, even if we want to take a drug that's already on the market and test whether it's effective for some new purpose, people have to go through that FDA approval process. But when we're dealing with a drug like cannabis, where there aren't any, or not very many previously approved products, and we're often testing new formulations, it's a little bit more of a complicated process.